Good morning again and welcome. We're so glad that you're here. We know there's a lot of feelings in the journey here or driving here today as well, but we're glad that we can come together. My name is Kathy Cromwell, and I'm one of the counselors in the Center for Grief and Healing. And so, welcome here today. Again, there was a question on the top of your packet asking about your biggest concern or challenge as you enter the holiday season. And we'll gather those towards the end, and that helps us ensure that we address everything, hopefully, that might be coming up. So, okay. Yeah, I can already hear some of you inhaling and exhaling and just kind of centering in this space, okay? Yeah. I want to begin with this traditional Jewish prayer. We come together as people drawn to life and yet people acquainted with death. We come full of our memories, those memories that lift us and give us meaning, those memories that give us the courage to go on. We come together today knowing that we're not alone, that others struggle even as we struggle, that others love even as we have loved, as we love still. We come together knowing that others hope, even as we try to hope, clinging to the assurances that help us make our way from hour to hour, from day to day. May we find our full share of love and hope now in this hour of togetherness. So, a little overview for today. We're going to really begin just talking about grief and normal reactions in grief, the impact of grief. And then we're really going to focus on the journey of grief through the holiday season. We'll talk about some strategies maybe for making a plan and creating rituals, identifying support networks, and probably most importantly, self compassion and also self care. Grief work fills up my heart and demands my every attention. I come to know myself in ways I never knew existed. So I know as each of you here are probably feeling so many emotions, the exhaustion of grief, right? And just how overwhelming that can feel as well. You know, grief doesn't feel normal, but it's that normal reaction to loss and love, right? So we so deeply miss this person that is no longer here, and we feel those emotions of grief. It's so important to remember that everyone's grief journey is very unique. And you probably are seeing that in your family system, right? So everyone experiences it often a little bit differently. And so I think why that's important to remember is because people can be pretty hard on themselves. And well, I should be doing it this way. And I see this person and it seems like they're doing it that way. And just, encourage you to be kind to yourself. You gently hold all of these emotions. And, this is your journey. Reactions in grief, right? We talk about there's the physical and the emotional and the spiritual and the cognitive. So there's so many emotions that we are experiencing, right? So physically, how many of you just feel out of sorts or have more aches and pains or find that you're getting ill more, right? You seem to catch every cold that comes along, all right? So we talk about it as a whole body experience, our grief, right? Our heart aches, we have headaches, stomach aches sometimes. So we experience it physically. Emotionally, there's so many emotions that we experience in grief, and sometimes a voice can come in and say, "Well, you shouldn't feel this, you should feel that." Right? You shouldn't feel this emotion. You should be that. You shouldn't feel angry. You should feel, you know, whatever that might be. And what I want to encourage you is to remember that we hold all those emotions. We don't have to just pick one. We get to say, I can feel this and I can feel this. Often I'll say, joy and grief, they sometimes coexist, right? You feel both. It's not, you don't have to choose one or the other. So that's really important to remember. Um, And then we feel it behaviorally, right? So, how about just feeling more irritable? Yeah, yeah, it's like the rubber band stretched. That's what I say. It's like, and one more thing that maybe before was a blip on the radar. And then the other piece is you're going through these intense emotions of grief. And so sometimes you might hear people complaining about something and you're just like, oh my goodness, right? My heart is broken in this grief. And so we can sometimes feel more irritable. Crowds can feel overwhelming, the stimuli. So important to remember. And so many things influence our grief journey. And, the relationship and the circumstances around the loss and our culture and our family system. So, what we hoped in this was just to really identify, there's so many facets to our grief and the journey. And just, you'll probably hear Candace and I say more than once today, be gentle with yourself, because that would definitely be a message we would want you to take.
Thanks, Kathy. Morning, everybody. I'm Candace Wilkins, another counselor at the Center for Grief and Healing, and we kind of tag team for this workshop. Just so you stay focused. You can get kind of boring sometimes with one person, I'm just really glad to be here. And I just what I noticed as Kathy was speaking is just so many of you nodding your heads in agreement, and just know that you're not alone. That we're here together today. We're with you. We're remembering your loved ones, and just I hope that you carry that with you when you leave today. And as Kathy said, each person's talking about the uniqueness in grief that we each have. Each person's grief journey is as unique as a fingerprint or snowflake. And that can, again, be so helpful for us to remember in our families where there's so much going on, different personalities, different life experiences. And really, it's okay for you to say, I'm going to really focus on what I need in my grief. Because as Kathy said, with the bandwidth, that's really sometimes all we can do. Um, And the journey of grief, it is often unpredictable, nonlinear, and lifelong. What I think about when I think about our perception of grief, and as human beings, because we're so logical, we use our brains to really try to understand this really tragic event that's happened, this loss that we've experienced. And so what happens, I think, oftentimes is that the farther along that we move from the date of the death of our loved one, that we believe sometimes, and maybe others even share this with us, that we should be at a certain point in our grief because we're moving away from the date of the death. But what do we know is actually true? That as we move farther along from that date, sometimes it can get even more difficult, right? Yeah. And sometimes those feelings really intensify. And so we might have others outside of us, making comments of where we should be in our grief. And we also have that internal self talk. How come I'm not farther along in my grief journey as I move away from the date of death? But what I'm here to share with you this morning and just to really validate is that can really actually become more difficult as we move farther away, right? Because we're learning to live this new life without the person that we love. And so often, what I hear grievers say is that the person that I most want to talk to about what's happening to me right now is a person I lost, right? And doesn't that really complicate and intensify our feelings sometimes? So, as we move through the holidays and as you continue along on your grief journey, say, yeah, I'm still really grieving and I'm still really experiencing some intense emotion, and that's okay. That's normal. That's normal. So that unpredictability and grief, we call them grief bursts sometimes, right? So I'm wondering, and you don't have to raise your hands, but I'm wondering how many of you have ventured into the grocery store and found yourself in a certain aisle and become tearful. Oh yeah, but I didn't ask for raised hands, but I still got one. Right? Because that happens, right? Something like a grocery store can really just trigger that grief burst, and that's okay, right? We learn to just normalize that in ourselves, practicing that self-compassion, as Kathy said, and just saying, it's okay that I'm having a little grief burst. It might be a little, awkward or something I haven't experienced before, and I've got to be equipped with my tissues or a plan to kind of, you know, gather myself if that's what feels helpful and comforting, but just to normalize that. So you probably think of lots of different areas that kind of trigger those grief bursts, and we'll actually have a slide for that a little bit later. Um, so definitely grief is nonlinear. Sometimes we, maybe if we haven't had this experience before, we think that grief has a starting point and an ending point, and that's just not really the way it works, right? This picture might kind of help kind of illustrate that. Yeah, yeah. The other example I like, I don't have a picture of it, but what I like to share with grievers is just kind of a little rowboat on the waves of the ocean, right? You might go through some time where the water's just kind of placid and tranquil, and other times it's bumpier, right? And then when we do have those times, often where it is a little bit more, maybe we're not experiencing a grief burst, then we're questioning why we're not grieving. Am I done grieving? What's wrong with me, right? So when we think about that and we put all of those pieces together, we go, yeah, grief is really hard work. It's really a new territory that I've never experienced before, and you're here today, to assist you on this grief journey. Keep reaching out, keep getting support. We're going to talk more about that as we go on, but really just to normalize that we need that support. This is really a difficult journey. And then also I wanted to just make sure and touch on that grief is lifelong, right? We may kind of learn to navigate through certain things and feelings, emotions, events as time goes on. That might be true, but we never stop really wishing that our loved one were still here with us. And so we can just validate that too. Death ends a lifetime, but not a relationship. We really are learning how to have a new relationship with this person who is no longer living here with us. And we're going to talk about rituals as we go on today and how to do that through the holidays so that we keep that relationship going in a new way.
So, briefly, just want to talk about different grieving styles. I think sometimes it can be helpful to hear and see different styles, and you might identify, okay, I see this happening with that family member or this family member, right? And so sometimes that can be helpful and validating for you as you might see your style. I feel honestly, people kind of have a foot in both, but probably lean towards one or the other. So, an intuitive griever is someone that has more open expression. You'll see the emotions, you'll see the sadness, the maybe feelings of depression, those waves of emotion. Intuitive grievers are usually processors, like they want to talk about it. And kind of unpack it and sort through it and process that in a supportive way. More often, intuitive grievers are women. Sometimes I describe it like this with clients. I'll say, if we go back to caveman days and we think about men and women, well, men were out hunting, right? And so their head had to be in the game of hunting. They weren't out there processing what was going on for them because they needed to be really focused, right? Task focused. And women were together, on the whatever that looked like, right? But with their clan together and processing. So I think even biologically, when we think about that, or even think about that through the years and sewing circles and things like that, where communication often happened more in the expression of emotions. So sometimes it isn't, comfortable for men. I know in working with couples in support group, sometimes, someone might say, I would love for my husband to come to group. And he's like, I don't want to sit and talk about how I'm feeling with a room full of people I don't know. Right? That's not comfortable to him or her. That could be a her that's an intuitive griever. I mean, an instrumental when we talk about instrumental. So more stoic. So what that means, it doesn't mean they aren't having the emotions, but you're just probably not going to see them. right? Sometimes there's a focus kind of to fix or complete, which sometimes can serve us well in grief. I don't know if any of you have like taken on a project, right? Maybe something at home, a project, and although it's exhausting because we know grief is very exhausting, it kind of can give you a sense of control in working on this project. For instrumental grievers, sometimes grief can feel powerless because it's not like we can give you, do step A, B, and C, and you're done. And for instrumental, sometimes that's kind of how their mind works, more kind of task focused. Again, affect tempered, and more often instrumental grievers, but certainly not always, are men. So Candace talked a little bit about grief triggers, and I know you are all very familiar with them. Some we anticipate, some blindside us, don't they? And then sometimes we anticipate something's going to be a grief trigger, and then it's not, right? But then there's those things that we never had an idea we're going to be that trigger, like the grocery store, right? You know, so certainly special occasions because, well, someone's missing and someone really important, right? So, you enter into a special occasion, maybe it's a wedding anniversary or a birthday. Many times people will say, I imagined their birthday was going to be difficult, but I never knew my birthday was going to be so hard. Huh, yeah. Because again, someone's missing and you just think of those memories, right? And that connection. Certainly, the anniversary of the death, the anniversary of the diagnosis, or the illness period can be a trigger, right? Our body holds memory as well. So you may find that you have the physiological feeling that triggers the emotions. And so just that awareness, often people will say the days leading up to ended up being harder than the actual day, because it's like, what's it going to be? How am I going to feel? What do I want to do? Who do I want around me? Who do I not want around me? All of those things. So, here's control and here's anxiety. So when we feel more in control, our anxiety goes down, right? But when we feel out of control, we feel more anxious. Anxiety is a very prominent feeling in grief, but one that surprises people, right? And it's around, how could this be? How could this have happened? It's so hard to just wrap your head around that, right? And sometimes we feel more vulnerable, and the world sometimes just doesn't feel as safe, you know? So, other grief triggers are food, right? Many times, food, we have a lot of rituals around food. Food can bring a comfort. We think of our loved one's favorite food, or maybe their food they didn't like. Um, and so that can be a trigger. How about music? Is music a trigger for some of you? Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times people will say, grievers, like, I can't even listen to music. It can really be a trigger. Travel, driving by somewhere that was a place that you went with your loved one, right? Or movies, television. When you see grief, like real time in a movie or television, and I feel like pretty much every movie has grief in it. My husband always says, "You can't even find a movie that doesn't have grief in it." No, because there's usually some level. So when you're grieving, you really feel that because you can identify often with that emotion. So there's triggers. Scents can be a trigger. I think the holidays, certainly seeing relationships, seeing the relationship that you're grieving. So whether it's, someone with a partner, spouse, or child, parent child, when you see that visually, maybe it's looking over in a restaurant, or, walking down the street, or social media is a big grief trigger often for people as well, right? Because you visually are seeing what you're so deeply yearning for. And then, of course, the holiday season. Another grief trigger can be the change in weather. I don't know if any of you have been noticing that this week. Yeah, and then the darkness, as the time changes and things like that. It seems everywhere you turn, there is something to break your heart. Stores are decorated with symbols of the holidays, and televisions and radios abound with stories and songs of togetherness, love, and sharing. Everyone you meet asks the question you dread hearing: what are you doing for the holidays? They cannot seem to wait for the special day to arrive, and you can't wait for it to be over. So, specifically around grieving through the holidays, just the seasonal change, and it brings memories, right? As you go into a season, it brings memories of past seasons with your loved one. And then, of course, those environmental changes that are occurring. And then also expectations. So, again, my little mantra, our little mantra, being gentle with yourself. And we're going to talk about some strategies. And because this season is going to be this season, it doesn't mean this is going to be what you do this season might not be next year, and maybe it will. But this season, it's about you kind of discovering and honoring what you need for yourself. Okay.
So, as part of this workshop, we share a letter that's written by a mother grieving the loss of her child, and so we're going to read the letter in three different parts, and you can follow along with this first part. I remember our first Christmas after. It began the first week of November in 1997, 3 short months into our worst nightmare, but a lifetime into missing our child of 18 years. He had died suddenly, one of those in the wrong place at the wrong time things, and he took our hearts with him when he left. Summer screeched to a halt, and autumn came and went without our participation. Still standing in confusion at the threshold of grief, we were stunned when the stores replaced the gloomy ghosts and goblins with sparkling ornaments and cheerful decorations. Neighbors strung lights on their houses. Friends sent cards wishing us joy filled holidays, and not one person mentioned Jason's name. Closing our drapes, we huddled into our cocoon, waiting for his return. Thanksgiving past, I recall the empty chair, the unbroken wishbone, and more turkey than three of us could eat. There was an unwatched football game and a failed attempt at gratitude. That was our day, and it was good enough. It was inconceivable that we would ever enjoy another holiday, much less be thankful for it. Snow fell, carols rang out, lights twinkled, church bells pealed. Our thoughts were of Jason, fixed more acutely on his departure than on his arrival 18 years before. Memories of prior Decembers pervaded our present. Jason ice fishing, Jason sledding, Jason's birthday, Jason opening gifts, Jason throwing tinsel on the tree, on his brothers, and on the dog. Every memory brought tears, but every tear brought Jason closer to us. We found him in the pain, the only place we knew how to get to. I believe that first Christmas had to be that way. Showing up was the best that we could do.
So, a few things for you to think about as you enter the holiday season. So, one of the things that I often share, and some of you may have heard me share this, is I encourage you to ask yourself the question, what do I need right now? Sometimes you might say, I don't even know. But many times you might know. Maybe it's reaching out to someone or having a cry or taking a walk or so these are kind of along those lines. So things for you to think about to identify, what concerns you most? What do you feel most concerned about or worried about, or what are you dreading the most? Because sometimes when we can just kind of formulate that or process that, it can take away some of the power that it might have in the concern that's coming from it. Okay. What do you need others to understand about you? So remember, we're all so unique. So, is there something that maybe you need to communicate with family or friends about what you need this holiday season? Now, we hear often, well, I don't want to, gosh, I don't want to burden people. I don't want to overwhelm them. I don't want to seem selfish in saying what I need. But the truth is, this is that season for you honoring what you need. And, when you let others know what you need and how they can support you, well, guess who they're going to be going to in their life when they're grieving and they need something? Because you opened that door, you know. Um, and so, again, what do you need from others? So it's rough because people will say, well, let me know if you need anything. And you're like, well, I don't know what I need, and what am I going to do? How? But I know that grievers will often say, I remember this person that showed up. So this week I teach a class at Fresno State, and I had some parents come in and talk. And one of the couples, it's been about 10 years since their son died, and they were talking about that, sharing with the students. Don't ask people what they need; they don't know. Just show up, send a text. I'm coming by with a cup of coffee. They could identify the people that were those people for them still 10 years later, right? Yeah, very powerful. So I always say like your close people, your inner tribe, like those people to say, this is what I need this holiday season. Yeah. And what can you do to help others? I guess when we think about that, I think about that just in your family. And what I would say probably the number one thing is communication, right? Just being open and honest. And often a great indicator, if you find yourself just feeling pretty resentful or more resentful, ask yourself the question, what am I not communicating that I might need to communicate? Because you know how that can just create that resentment, or just that unsettled, right, in us, or what boundary might I need to set, or things like that. So those are a few things to think about. So with your holiday plan, it's just I always say it's good to have a plan. Sometimes people will say, I'm just going to pretend it's not here. Well, that's rough because I mean, you see it everywhere. You have reminders. You get Christmas cards, and you know what? Sometimes you might get a Christmas card and just feel really mad. Sometimes people feel shame for that. I say, no, that's because maybe it's one of those picture cards, and you're like, oh, that hurts because I don't have that this year, right? So again, being gentle with yourself. Um, Sometimes I like skip around, so this might be on a slide later, but it just fits right now. But I encourage the best friend barometer. So what that is, if you would not say something to your best friend or someone that you love, I encourage you not to say it to yourself, right? So, well, you should be able to do this, and you shouldn't be, right? And then sometimes I'll ask clients, how would that be, sharing that to someone your best friend? They're like, oh, I would never say that to them, right? So how can we have that kindness and compassion? So you think about the people that you want to be with this holiday season. Again, stimuli can feel overwhelming, noise. So you just kind of think about what that is going to be for you, and parties and gatherings. So, a couple of things, you might get invited to a party, and as we talked about, grief is so unpredictable. You don't know how you're going to feel that day. So, unless you absolutely don't want to go, then right, then I'm going to RSVP no. But if it's something that you think, gosh, I've enjoyed that in the past, I might want to go, then with your RSVP, you can say, I would love to be there, but grief is just so unpredictable. And so if I'm not there, you'll just know. that it was a rough day or something like that. So then you don't have to call and say, "Sorry, I'm not gonna be there," right? You've already said that. Great if you're there. So again, control too. That gives you some control in that. Like you get to decide and honor that. And if you're saying if head and heart, if your head's like, "Well, you should do this," and being hard on yourself, and your heart's like, it just feels like too much to go and be in this environment for the where I'm feeling today. I'm going to encourage you right here to honor your heart. Or if it's something you say, well, Kathy, there's no way. I need to go to this. This is an obligation. I don't feel okay not to go. Okay. And just take care of yourself in that. What do you need in that time? And you may, be the one that hosts events, right? And you may feel like, I remember at this workshop years ago, we used to set up in tables, and there was this family mom and like 4 or 5 daughters. And her husband had died, and then she came up after with her girls, and she just said, adult daughters, and she just said, "Oh, I'm so glad you talked about, the exhaustion and being okay with it different this year because I was feeling such pressure or self-imposed, like pressure of doing it the same." And her girls were all there with her saying, "It's okay. It can be different this year." So really honoring that. Decorating. Many people say, "I don't even feel like decorating. I don't have the energy to decorate." And that's okay. Again, this is this year. You honor what you need. And yeah, that's what's important. Holiday cards, that can be, there, I think the other thing is, it triggers grief, right? Even writing the cards, if it was, especially if you normally would maybe sign with your loved one's name or send a, photo card in a specific way or things like that. So maybe you'll send cards, maybe you won't. You might get cards that have your loved one's name on them because there might be someone that doesn't know, right? So yeah, it just again doing what's right for you on that, right? If your head's like, well, I should do this. I've done this for the past 30 years. Well, maybe it's okay to not do it this year. Huh? Defining roles. So this is important, and what I mean by this is if your loved one played a specific role in your holiday traditions and gatherings, you want to kind of assign that role to someone. So what do I mean by that? Maybe your loved one was the one that handed out the gifts or carved the turkey. Like, how people have some real specific roles. So it can be helpful to identify who's going to do that ahead of time. You're certainly going to feel it anyways and miss them not doing that. But then it kind of that awkward place of, okay, who's going to do this, and um, so that's what we mean by defining roles. Meals, baking. Again, you're exhausted. Your grief takes pretty much all of you, right? And so feeling that emotional exhaustion, so maybe you'll do meals and might have some of your loved one's favorite dishes, or maybe you won't. And so just again, honoring that. Same thing with baking. Shopping. Shopping can be difficult. I think, now we have so many kind of online shopping options, which can be nice because sometimes just being out in the stores can flood you, right? Can just feel overwhelming, exhausting, the reminders of the loss and that kind of thing. Um, Travel, sometimes people say, I'm going to do things differently this year. I'm pretty sure that Disneyland might be and some of these kind of places filled with a lot of grievers because a lot of times people will say, I want to do something different, right? Or maybe go to the coast or something different. And that's okay. You define whatever that is for you. If you want to do it different this year, what I encourage is just talking about it within your family system. Okay, what are you guys thinking? Because I'm kind of thinking, but again, pretending it's just another day just doesn't really work because there's so many reminders. And
I was thinking that one of the nice things about coming to a workshop like this and all of the things that you're learning today is as you kind of take this information and go out into your families and into your friend communities and workplaces and things like that, you can share what you've learned and blame it on Candace and Kathy. And just say, well, I don't have to do that this year because Kathy and Candace said I don't have to. So I'm going to take care of me this year. So yeah, you make sure and blame that on us, which I do tell my clients to just say Candace, that's what Candace told me. And so that's okay. So we're going to talk about rituals. And I really appreciate this part of the presentation because it really kind of gets us thinking a little bit outside of the box. And maybe some of you have already created some rituals just since the day that your loved one died. And so this will be kind of familiar to you. And I just, again, kind of encouraging that outside of the box thinking, the discussions within your family, as Kathy said, the communication. This says creating rituals, embracing memories. Those who have lived in our hearts are never really gone. As long as we keep them with us in our hearts and our thoughts, they will be with us always. For love, which is timeless, never ceases to exist. So, really, a ritual. Just feel very empowered to make this whatever feels helpful and comforting to you. There's a list here about a ritual can be private, it can be public, it can be of a faith tradition or religious or non-religious. And sometimes, when we talk about the difference between private and public, you might have a ritual that you decide upon within your family system. Um, but it also might be something that you as an individual create for your loved one between the two of you. One of the best examples is my cousin who recently lost her dad. Her ritual is when she goes to visit her dad at the cemetery, she always takes him a cup of McDonald's coffee because that's what he liked. So that's something kind of outside of holiday time. But some of you might already be doing something like that. It's personal for her, it's not religious. And it's just something that makes her feel connected, really that continuing bond with her father, as we've talked about. Um, and so again, just kind of taking that concept and then moving it into the holidays. I'm going to save stocking because Kathy will share with you about that. She does a good job of an example that we have. But what I want you to think about is when we are considering having a holiday without our loved one, how do we want to still include them? Sometimes people will at the table still have an open chair, and that's their chair. That's where they sat. Sometimes a candle could be lit in their honor. Maybe we want to share memories or something like that as we're having a discussion. Maybe a special ornament is theirs on the Christmas tree or a tree or whatever the tradition that you're celebrating, incorporating that. One of the things that my best friend Lori does with her family is that whenever they have a family gathering, they always light a candle for her dad. His name is Papa Ted. And I love talking about it because we remember him, right? Just in the sharing of these ideas and things like that. And so whenever Lori's family has a gathering, they light a candle for Papa Ted and they just take a few moments to just speak to him corporately together as a family and say, we miss you, we love you, we wish you were here. And then they go on with their gathering. And it's just been something they've done for 4 years. And it's very meaningful. And everybody expects that that's part of their time together when they get together as a family. So, and some of these already, Kathy has addressed with just what we do during the holidays, food, holiday cards. And I'm trying to think if there's something else I would add. So just kind of thinking about what might be helpful and comforting to you. It might be something again that you haven't done before, but that you want to try to incorporate new this year. Oh, and let me have Kathy talk about the stocking.
So we have this stocking, and I'll set it on the table so that you can see it afterwards. So one of the things that can be difficult, if that is a tradition that you've had with stockings, people will say, "Do I put up my loved one's stocking? Do I not put it up?" And so you'll kind of think about how that is for you. I've had um, parents or families say that they put it up, and then they'll put a little. I remember one family, they had a little crystal bowl by it with pins, and people could write memories and put it in the stocking. And this stocking was made by a mother, and it has a picture on the front of her son. And so she gave this to us years ago, and then she also gave us a letter that explains it that I want to read to you. I better put my glasses on now. As you gaze upon the stocking made of love in memory of your loved one, here are some things to think about. You may wish to place a photo in the pocket to enjoy, or you may choose to leave it empty to represent the emptiness you now feel because of your loss. You may hang it this year, every year, or all year, or you may tuck it away like we have all learned is sometimes the safer thing to do. Sometimes our grief is too private. It can't hang in the front room for all to view. You may notice the frayed fabric and the imperfect stitches, how frayed and rough we feel with our loved one gone from our everyday life. Our eyes are drawn to the color and the words. They represent the colorful parts of the lives we are now missing. The imperfect stitches are the hiccups of life that bound us to the one we have lost and the difficult situation in which we have lost our loved one. In loving memory, this is what we do every day, every morning. Our relationships, our jobs, our housework, our daily activities, our lives are now in loving memory of the ones that we mourn. It's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. So we'll have that back there for you to see. Just a couple of things I wanted to touch on. Sometimes people will continue to buy ornaments, kind of memory ornaments. So that's a tradition sometimes that people do. And again, this may be a tradition that you do this year, or maybe you don't. Maybe you start it next year. Or again, it can change and will through the years. Food, their favorite food, maybe you'll have that and talk about that because it can also be a conversation starter, right? So you may go into this family gathering and no one says their name. So it might be you that initiates that, right? And then prayers, if that's a ritual in your family, you may think about who will say that prayer and is it important that you want to have your loved one included. So again, to do some maybe a little planning around that. Some people do have a place setting or light a candle. So, that's something you could do too if that felt right for you. The gift drawing, now again, I think the unpredictable piece of the holiday season, there's going to be some things that of course, hadn't thought about, and then it comes up, and it certainly can be a gift trigger. The drawing can be that too, because again, it's that separate piece of not having them included in that. So if that's something you do, well, maybe they're still in it. And who draws them can, give to a charity or I don't know. I mean, you could get creative in that. So again, as Candace, that quote that we have on our brochure and we talk about a lot, that death ends a lifetime and not a relationship, you're still so connected to them. Like they're forever your child, your parent, your grandchild, right? So that sometimes can help um, with that as well. By now, it is 6 trees, 6 silent nights, and 6 collectible ornaments later. I've learned a few things about this path I'm on and found a few crunches for when the road gets too rough. Holidays can be disabling for those who grieve. I'd like to share some things that might help. Believe that your loved one is with you. Include them in your celebrations and in your sadness. Include them when you talk with others about old times and holidays past. If you don't mention them, no one else will. Talk to them. They hear your thoughts, and if you listen, you can hear their replies. Light candles. For 6 years now, I have lit a special candle for my son. This year, I will light 5, one for each of us, living or not. Why perpetuate the myth of separation? Jason is still a part of this family. I thought that was really beautiful. Call a newly bereaved friend or neighbor and invite them to reminisce with you, cry with them, listen to them, and share your journey. You are solely in charge of this journey. It is all yours. I wanted to share, we have an event that we do. I feel like we've done it probably around 15 years now. It's called Lights of Love. It's out at River Park, that big tree in front of Yoshino's. So that's our memorial tree. We do a candle lighting, tree lighting. It's a beautiful ceremony. We'll read the names of loved ones, have some prayer and poem, and just a really special time. And some families have been there every year. And sometimes I'll see people in past support groups and they just kind of find each other, we do read a lot of names. There's probably, I don't know, 200, 250, 300 that come, but it's just this, it's so in this busyness of River Park, it's just amazing, like this sacred space. So just know about that, and that'll be coming up, and we have some handouts on that. Got to make sure I'm not taking Candace's slide here. Okay. Okay, so I want to talk about children and grief during the holidays. Um, and again, children's grief journey is also unique, right? Because they turn it off and on. They might be crying or and talking about it, expressive one moment, and then the next moment they may, be plain, right? They can turn that off and on in that way. But we do talk about involving children in the planning. So I have a little story, full like self-disclosure on my experience when my children were young and my dad died, and my father-in-law had died on Christmas Day the year before. And so thought it was before I did this work, I will say that. We're just doing the best we can. What we know is right. So I thought, I'm going to do it all different. Every year I do this workshop, I got to find the picture, you guys, and put it in the slide, because usually I have a traditional tree with the traditional ornaments, right? This year it was like neon purple and turquoise and pink bows and bulbs. It was a very different tree than I normally had. Um, and I just was like trying to do everything different. I didn't do a really good job of communicating a whole lot with my children about grief. I think my stance at the time was, the young mom, like, okay, I'm going to protect them and make this, try to make this all okay and not. But it was sad, right? It was a sad day. So I'll never forget. I'm tucking my 5-year-old son into bed, and he just starts to cry. Oh, and it was an artificial tree, and we always had a real tree. So that was like the, and he was like, "Why do we have that tree that looks like that anyway? And where are our ornaments?" And, I didn't even think about talking to them about it. So we kind of laugh about it now. Again, I can share that with you. But at the time, I sure thought it was the right thing to do, right? Because that's what we do. So involve them if you're going, especially if you're going to make changes, because they've already had this big life change with losing this precious person. So again, what can they control? Or maybe you say to them, I'm thinking about this for the holidays. What do you think? What do you think that we should do? Okay, so being honest and open. Sometimes people will say, I don't want to cry in front of my children because, it'll make them sad, and it will. Yet, if we don't let them see us cry and have emotions, what do you think they think when they're crying? They kind of think it's not right, huh? Right. So you can support that expression when you're just honest and open and share your feelings. I'm feeling really sad. Or if you do start to cry, I'm feeling sad. I miss your dad, or I miss your mom, or right. So touch, encourage questions, and remember that you don't have to have the answers. So sometimes we think, we need to know how to answer, and sometimes we just don't. And we could say, I don't know the answer. Why did this have to happen? I don't know the answer to that. What do you think? So engage them in that. And then, again, sharing about the feelings that you're having. So, identifying your support networks, family can be a great support, right? They're grieving. There's different connections within the family, yet sometimes those things can also weigh on that support system, right? Because everyone's, grieving and having different emotional reactions. So, and the other thing that sometimes happens in families is people hold back a lot and don't want to share too much to not so they don't upset the other person, right? So there's kind of this protection that goes on. Friends can be a great support network. Again, I encourage you, as exhausting as it is, and it would be great if people could just read your mind and know exactly what you need, right? And just show up and know at that time. But they can't, and so you identify what are and sometimes in grief there may be friends that it's not like we aren't ever going to be friends with them, but we might say, for right now in my journey, they might not be helpful, right? Many times people say to me, the person that I thought that was going to be there for me has not been. Mhm. But there's been this other person that has showed up, so doesn't take away, again, we hold those both. Doesn't make this okay that that person has not been there, but we're glad that this other person is showing up, whoever that might be. Professional, whether it be, through a church, an organization. We of course have our support at the Center for Grief and Healing. Coworkers can be a good support, yet sometimes, in the place of work, it's like this busyness. Let's just get it done, and people might kind of forget you're grieving too. And that can be rough because, in grief, right, you're depleted, your energy is lower. So you notice that in the workplace too. So, again, churches or organizations, and sometimes you might have to reach out to them, which can be hard too, and let them know what you need. Certainly, other grievers can also be a support. So there might be someone in your family or your support network that also is grieving a loss. Sometimes they can be, or certainly, we have our support groups at Heinz Hospice. So there's some other opportunities there. So often I'll encourage people when they're thinking about their support system, because usually, like, one person doesn't pack it all in. So when you think about your system, like, who's that doer and someone that can help you? Because again, you're exhausted, you can feel overwhelmed. So can someone help you with tasks or pick up things or, do something to help you out? Who's that listener? And that's someone who's just able to sit and listen as you tell your story. And sometimes we need to tell our story over and over, don't we? And process through that. And so it's a listener is typically not someone that's an advice giver, they're just can be present in that. A respite is someone just knows how to make you laugh and you can have fun with. Who might that person be? And then again, caution. Sometimes, people or situations, we may have some distance or some space and time, take some space and time before acting on that. But sometimes they're just too painful. In terms of maybe what's happening in their family system, or so if that voice comes in and says, oh, you're being selfish, you're not, again, you want to go back to the self-care and honoring that. I think it's important when we think about self compassion and we remember it's okay to not be okay. We have quite a culture of happiness and gratitude and those kinds of things, which I won't say are wrong, but we also honor our emotions and our feelings. And this is rough. And there's days that don't feel okay. And there's days that feel overwhelming, right? And we honor those emotions and we gently hold those as well. So, self compassion, I talked about the best friend barometer. So, it really is about recognizing when we're, feeling overwhelmed or flooded with grief and without being judgmental on ourselves or hard on ourselves. So, how can we be kind to ourselves? Self kindness, be supportive and understanding towards ourselves. When we're having a hard time, rather than being hostile or towards ourselves, and just connecting. remembering that not everyone. Um, I need my glasses because I can't read that on. Remembering that everyone makes mistakes. Oh, there, I just made one right there. See? I didn't have a note. I had to. Again, that gentleness, right? Because sometimes you're going to say something because you're just, again, the rubber band's stretched, and then you'll be like, oh, be kind to yourself in grief, okay? So, self compassion, again, is gentleness and patience with self. Self compassion is reaching out to your support system. So, I really want to encourage that. People will say, I don't want to overwhelm people. I don't want to burden people. Well, the truth is, I think people are grateful when you give them something to do. And if they're not, well, they shouldn't have offered, right? But I do think people are grateful. We talked about the best friend barometer, awareness of needs around social media. So, of course, when I started this workshop years ago, that wasn't part of the slide because we didn't have social media. But, just that impact can be really difficult to see those visuals. So, you might just be aware of what that is for you and what you need to do for you. And then realistic expectations, and just know your energy is depleted, the emotional impact. And so, the don't expect to get maybe as much done as you did last year or the year before. So self-care during the holidays, definitely the rest. Don't overcommit. Another thing that can be helpful is if someone asks you to do something, and this might even be around an organization you're in or a group you belong to or at work. It might not always work at work, but if someone asks you to do something, you can say, "Can I get back to you on that?" Because then you can think about, like, is it something I really want to do? Do I have the bandwidth to do it? Because how many times have you said, "Oh yeah, I want to do that. I'll do that," and then you walk away and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I so don't want to do that." And now it's hard to go back. So, you know, exercise, and what I say about that is just, just moving and being out in nature. Nature can remind us of the beauty in the world. Thank heavens, it's the temperature is changing. The leaves will be changing. Monitor alcohol use, just being aware of that because it can be a depressant. It influences sleep, right? Impacts our REM sleep, which is so needed because that's how we process trauma. That's how we process the day. So that's really, just be aware of that. A self-care list or maybe a basket, what are the things, and I think in your handout there's a sheet with a butterfly, what are the things that you can do to take care of yourself? Music. So what I mean by music in this, so when you think about the music of your teens, I bet, see, I see some head nods, some smiles, right? You guys have a song, you have an artist, I know it. I'm not going to ask you to sing it. I won't sing mine, Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer. But the thing about that music is because of what was happening for us in our brain development at that time of adolescence, that's why it feels different. That's why you smile when you think about it. So now it could be a grief trigger as well, but it might be something to lift your mood as well. So you could try that. Healthy foods, just drinking water, staying hydrated, and engaging in activities that just help you feel purposeful and give you meaning. And again, really monitoring, what you have the bandwidth for.
I thought we'd just take a have the time now where we're going to collect the questions. So if you didn't have an opportunity to answer the little question in the square little paper that you have, um, you can do that now. Sylvia's going to come with a little basket and just collect those, and we'll read them at the end. They're just a little anonymous, kind of, gauge where are you at in your grief, what feels most challenging, and what can be so helpful about the answering those questions together is that you hear some of the challenges that others are having during this time, and see how similar those are. That can be helpful to us as well. Okay, so just continuing on with self-care, and actually, I'm gonna jump ahead real quick here, and then I'll go back to that one. But one of the things I wanted to make sure and touch on today too is um, when we ask ourselves this question, and again, I won't ask for a show of hands, but you can think about how many times do you ask yourself, "What do I need today?" How many of you are in the practice of asking yourselves that? You know, I think a lot of times, and I know Kathy's shared a story. I've heard her tell at least once where, in talking with a client, I've never asked myself that question, right? So today, you get permission to ask yourself that. What I want to really point out here, too, is for those of you who are here today who may have been caring for an ill loved one, maybe your role was primary caregiver, and maybe it was a lengthy illness. Maybe it was a short illness. I know some of our hospice families may be here with us today. For those of you in a situation like that, did you even have the bandwidth then to ask yourself about your own needs? A lot of times we don't because we are so heavily into caregiving for our loved one. And so now we experience that shift. It's really, in a clinical term is a reframe. We can now ask ourselves, what do I need? And you get permission to actually prioritize that after you ask the question, right? So when you go back to the list of self-care and all of those different things, what on that list have you not done for yourself recently or in the last 10 years? And what might be a good thing to kind of bring back into your practice? Was journaling on that list? I don't know, but journaling can be a really good way of um, processing our feelings. And I know Kathy had talked about, this place of holding all of our different feelings at once and how important that is. And as you explore what you need and all of those feelings going on, one of the things I always remind people is if you haven't seen the Pixar movie Inside Out, that can be a really helpful movie uh, for people in understanding feelings. And the sweet little character Riley that's in this film, she has all of these different feelings at once. Some of them are actually really comical. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it gives you a good chuckle. But two, just reminding us we have so much going on internally for us that it really does require us to ask ourselves, what do we need right now? Try to remember about your basic self care. When things get tough, try to implement and keep track of where those simple tasks are in your life, um, and what you need to do to achieve them. Sometimes self care is about bubble baths, movie nights, and things you don't do on a daily basis. But other times, it's about taking a shower, drinking water, and making sure you're fed. When in doubt, go back to the basics, right? Taking a walk. I know that's one of the things that's hard for us to share with you all in the summer, right? Because it's hard to take a walk. But now with the season changing and it cooling off, maybe you can get outside and get some of that vitamin D, and have some time in nature before it gets too cold.
So just, when it's important to reach out and seek additional help, um, is, if you find that you have self destructive behaviors or maybe increased alcohol use or use of illicit drugs, any suicidal thoughts or actions destructive to others, or just lack of self care and excessive isolation. So, just important to reach out, know that there's support available, and reach out if you have any of those experiences. So here's the third part of the letter. I won't end this letter with a wish that you have your happiest holiday ever. I know that for some of you, that is not possible or even desirable. Instead, my wish for you is this. That you find a quiet moment during the sometimes magical but often horrendous season upon us and relax. That you take a few deep breaths, close your eyes, and envision your friend, child, parent, sibling, spouse, grandparent, or partner. That you accept that they have died, but that doesn't mean they are gone. That you send out a happy holidays and I love you, and then believe when you hear his or her whispered reply of, I love you too. So I think we have the questions. Oh, perfect. I'll read some and then hand it to Candace too. Again, this is, a couple reasons for this. If there's anything we want to make sure and address, but I think it's also very validating as you hear others' questions. What's your biggest concern or challenge as you enter the holiday season? I miss my mom, and it makes me sad she is gone, even though we never did much at holidays. Yeah, but it's a season that we think about families and together, and right. I worry about not having the energy to do much. Yeah, and I think that's probably a reality. And so that's when, is there a support system, expectations of self and kindness. Biggest concern or challenge is being alone. And that certainly can feel hard. And might there be someone or organization that you may reach out to, or maybe you don't want to, huh? So you'll kind of figure that out. Biggest concern or challenge facing the first holiday season without my sister. Yeah. Memories of our last holiday together and carrying the weight of emotions for my entire family. So it can feel like that, huh? That can be the experience, and just navigating all that and all those emotions. Biggest concern or challenge, my son and him not being here with us, and the sorrow. Yeah. Again, being alone. This is our second Christmas without our oldest son. Our daughter and youngest son have also moved to the Bay Area and one to Washington State. Not sure if we'll have any kids at home for any holidays. It feels like we are really alone here. Not wanting to uh, want to make sure that Nick is included in whatever we end up doing. Yeah, so I hear that, just feeling really different. And then we grieve. There's so many secondary losses that you grieve, right? And so that change, and you're grieving that change of how the holidays are different. Missing out because I isolate myself. Yeah. Do you find we do in grief that we tend to isolate more, kind of as a protection, as a security, right? So you'll gauge that, like we talked about. Do you want to go? Do you not? Maybe you go and you leave early, but just really giving yourself the permission to honor what you need. Okay. And this person shares, I don't want to participate in the holiday season, period. Yeah. Yeah. There's head nods. There's others feeling that way as well. Feeling overwhelming sadness, inability to find the joy and spirit in the holidays. Absolutely. Yeah. Not being able to see both of my grandmas during the holiday. So that's hard, right? Grandmas can be such a special relationship, and we miss them and you know, who they are, who they were in these traditions. Biggest challenge, being happy without my deceased mother during the holidays. My mood affects my family. I'm not very good at pretending. Yeah. So sometimes we might just need to say, you know what, I just need, today's a rough day, and I'm feeling more irritable. I'm feeling, more anger, whatever that is. Um, Not seeing my mom at our family gatherings, longing for her love and affection. Yeah. Yeah. such preciousness that of relationships that we miss too. Being able to keep up with what I need to do, being alone Christmas Day. So again, just that change, right? And what that looks like this year.
What is your biggest concern or challenge as we enter this holiday season, dealing with people who have lost loved ones during this season? For sure. Yeah. Overwhelming sadness. Just continuing to just hear from you that, we just have feelings of sadness. One of the things that, when I'm with clients and I say, what are you feeling most, or what's feeling most present for you? And most often I would say, but they say, I just miss, and then their loved one's name. I just miss them. And that's that the longing for them. And I don't know that goes away. We maybe get used to having the feeling of longing for them, and we recognize it and know what that is. Um, but for sure, coping with the absence of my wife of 63 years, missing her during all of the days of my family. Yeah, that's a really, really long time to have a marriage and then to now be learning to adjust to not having our spouse with us during the season. How do I still celebrate without my Nana? How can I help my 4 children through this? Yeah. And just recognizing Nana is important part of the family, her important place in the family, and then really learning how to grieve and using what was shared today about children and their grief process and how it's okay to model our sadness and our our longing for that person, and remembering together, inviting that. What memories do you have of Nana? What do we remember about her and want to share today? Loneliness for both of my parents. I lost my father December 27th, 2014, and I lost my mother Christmas Eve this past year. She died on their wedding anniversary. I have missed I have missed feelings over the holiday, overall happy they are together. Oh. Mhm. I have missed feelings over happy they are together. Um, how am I going to be able to be there for the rest of the family? That support system we talked about, in that, we are grieving together perhaps as a family. And then who can identify as that support person outside of the family to really support me as I support others? How, what is our biggest challenge or concern during this holiday season? How to celebrate the season in my husband's absence, making Christmas special for my child. Yeah. This will be the second holiday season since losing my husband last year was a blur. How do I enjoy the holidays without guilt and grief? Mm, yeah. I know that we hear a lot from grievers in that first year, and maybe some of you were there, today. Um, we hear sometimes the language feeling like we're in a fog. A blur is also a good way to describe that. And guilt is sometimes a feeling that we have when we're grieving, and just to normalize that doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong, but sometimes we just have that feeling. It can be something that others speak to very quickly. Oh, don't feel guilty because X, Y, and Z. Um, and not to say that that can't be helpful, but it's okay to acknowledge that feeling first instead of trying to push it down or squash it. Let it come up and say, yeah, that's a real feeling I'm having, and then get some support around that feeling. We can help you at Center for Grief and Healing, your support network. We know that you are really doing the best that you can in the situations that you're in. This will be the first holiday season without my mom, and she lived for the holidays and to lead the family gatherings. Yeah. Whose role is that now? We talked about that, and really just such a significant loss, especially when a loved one really, really loves the holidays. We talked, there was someone else who shared it was really wasn't, it's not necessarily a big maybe celebration in the family, and that's it, but still having feelings around that. And then in this situation, mom really being the focal point for the holidays. What is the biggest challenge or concern during this holiday season? Getting better at dealing with the loss, feeling overwhelmed with the holidays, loneliness, and sadness. Yeah, a lot of those similar experiences we're having. Just getting through the holidays without my mom, since the holidays were so important to her, it feels so daunting and painful. So, someone else who really, mom was at the helm with the holidays. This will be the first holiday season since my wife passed. So, I don't know what my concerns are. Mhm. Yeah, sometimes we don't know until we get there. Remembering my daughter during Christmas while still trying to make it happy for my granddaughter. I want to definitely remember in our grief as well. I'm not looking forward to the holidays, but my 3-year-old great granddaughter deserves joy and happiness since mom's not here. So I will do all I can to help her get that. My daughter will have a very time, so I want to be there for her too. Mhm. Yeah. Again, finding that support that we need as we support others. What is the biggest concern or challenge? Staying healthy. Not sure if I will be able to celebrate this year. We skipped last year. Well, one of the things we haven't talked about is, this is the first workshop gathering we've had since 2019. We didn't have a gathering in 20 or 21. And so here we are again together, but still feeling concerned about our health and wellness for sure. Staying safe is a concern or challenge, of course. And lastly, this will be my second holiday season without my son. Last year's season was awful for our family, and I don't want to repeat it. Christmas Day was canceled. Yeah, we're just doing our best to navigate through that. Thank you.
So as you came in, we gave you a candle, and you can turn it on at the bottom. And so we invite you to do that. We're going to just do a little closing ritual. This is a poem that we use often. So just invite you to light your candle. Maybe you put your hand on your heart and just feel that heart connection that's forever, forever with the one you love. Okay. I'm going to read, I'll read the light print, and then you can read in the dark print. It's called We Remember Them. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. So thank you for being here. We wish you just a gentle holiday season. And just know that we're available in the Center for Grief and Healing, and there's different materials about things we have going on. And maybe we'll see you out at the Lights of Love if that feels like something you want to participate in. It can be chilly. We've had the range of weather, and the other thing I always say is you can bring like a little portable chair because the seating is limited. But maybe we'll see you there. Okay, so take care.